Thank you for joining us for Blackstone Book Talks, Turning the Clock on Time Travel Fiction, a dual launch celebration joined by Blackstone authors Darren Wearmouth and Nick Jones. Darren is the best-selling author of numerous international novels, including his 2020 release Don't Move, Awakened, and today's audio format launch of Slingshot. Nick is the best-selling author of the Joseph Bridgeman series, composed of Book 1, And Then She Vanished, Book 2, The Shadows of London, and his most recent release, The Observer Effect, which launched on March 15th, 2022. We're so excited to have both of you guys here in discussion as we're celebrating both of your audio format and your All Rights format launch, and discuss the subject of time travel, which I know is a really hot topic in sci-fi and leaves much room to be explored. So I'm going to be removing myself from the conversation, but I would love to kick it off with our first introductory question to you both. What is the time travel fiction, and this can include, stories, movies, video games, whatever, that you hold near and dear to your heart, and how did they shape the making of both Slingshot and the Joseph Bridgeman series in full?
First of all, thank you very much for the introduction. There's very kind words. I'm sure Nick thinks the same too, but I would say a good inspiration for me with my time travel in fiction would be the Terminator franchise, which is one of my favorites. In fact, I would say the sequel is the best ever sequel made to a movie. I know that's debatable. I mean, Nick, do you agree or disagree?
Well, I instantly decided that we're based on just that comment alone that we're going to be friends. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's funny because sometimes it never gets lumped into the time travel bracket, but obviously it is. And later on, when we discuss some of the time travel elements and or paradoxes, I can take us through that one. But I just like it. I like for me, I mean, I love going back in history with time travel. It's really a really cool idea to like go back and travel and change past events. But I think for me, the allure of going forward and seeing what we don't know is more compelling, and that kind of inspires me to do it. What about yourself?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. For me, it's like I think when I first set out and started writing time travel, well, first of all, I thought, "What are you doing, you idiot?" Because it's really difficult. And then I kind of thought, okay, for me, it was sort of going into the past. It was the ability to go back and change something that I found the most interesting. And I had quite a fear about the future. I think maybe just as a writer, I was quite fearful that I could do it justice without it being crazy. But I think I've ended up doing quite a lot of writing about the future and actually really enjoying it. But yeah, I think in terms of influences, I mean, Terminator 1 is the sort of classic, almost kind of, it feels almost like an indie film, doesn't it? But Terminator 2, amazing. I think that really, really sparked my imagination in terms of how big and also small you could go with it. They kept it very personal, very character driven, and yet you had this huge kind of landscape that they were working with, which I thought was brilliant. I've realized actually recently there was so much that influenced me as a kid, and actually when I've gone back and watched some of the films, I've kind of gone, oh my god, I must have soaked that up as a kid. So Somewhere in Time, there's a Christopher Reeve film called Somewhere in Time, where he effectively falls in love with a woman in the past via a painting, and then thinks his way back out of kind of love and passion for this woman, and thinks his way back in time. That kind of blew my mind because there was no kind of time machines as such. And that definitely fed into my work. I think Time Traveler's Wife, I read that just before I started writing my time travel, and that reassured me that you could write a kind of crossover novel that didn't have to be super sci-fi. You could actually make it quite character based. And anything Stephen King's written that's remotely time travel, that just seems to go straight into burns into my brain. So yeah, I think for me, primarily the influences for time travel have been movies. There's a few books, but for me it's always the kind of movies and stuff. And then the ultimate is for me is Back to the Future. That's probably my favorite film of all time. So that's kind of why I write, I think.
Yeah, totally. It just making me laugh when you said Back to the Future, because I mean, I love that too. The co-writer I've written in Blackstone with James, he's a massive Back to the Future fan as well. And I sent him a cameo from the band member who hurt his hand
Right.
I mean, it's some Earth Angel for him on the cameo. It was sweet, and it only cost me $25.
Wow.
I hope he's not
That's
watching.
the best $25 you've ever spent.
Yeah, I know. But it's same as you. It's all come through movies. I like the TV show 12 Monkeys. I like
Oh
that.
yeah, brilliant. I quite
Yeah.
enjoyed the movie as well. But yeah, they're both what I thought were good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very kind of gritty and kind of, yeah, an interesting version of time travel, wasn't it?
It was because they ticked all the boxes for satisfaction of going back to the different time periods, and they had a future. But as you say, they came from a place that was much worse than modern day, and that's what made it interesting. When he come back from the future and he was starving and then injured, and they were facing attacks from the outside, and it kind of went it went a little bit left field near the end, but I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got some questions in the chat box as well, helping us along. I hope that's not
Cool.
giving anything away. But let me put this one to you, okay? What were some of the early struggles or issues you had to confront about time travel fiction?
Yeah. Well, I've given one of them away, which was why the hell am I doing this? So I think, you know, it's not the easiest thing to write because I think there are so many tropes that go along with it, and I think the expectation from readers, you know, there's so much that's already out there and already been done. So I think for me, it wasn't so much I mean, I think for me it was writing in general. I felt like I'd kind of hit my stride by the time I'd come to want to write this time travel book, and I had loads of kind of, you know, loads of ideas. But I think what I didn't want to do was just copy something else. So I think the biggest struggle for me was the rules. You know, I really wanted to write something that I didn't just fill it full of paradoxes and just not care if something didn't quite make sense. I actually became quite obsessed with it. So in the first book in the series, you know, Joseph Bridgeman, my character, discovers via an accidental session of hypnosis. Well, the hypnosis wasn't accidental, but he accidentally discovers that he can time travel. And for me, I came up with this kind of elastic band theory, which is the further back in time you go, the less time you get to stay there. So it almost pulls you back quicker. So the further back in time you go, the less time you get to do anything there. And I actually ended up working with a physicist on a spreadsheet that showed a logarithmic graph to make sure I was getting this stuff right. So I became quite obsessed with the rules. And I think that, although that felt very difficult at the beginning, and I felt like it was potentially going to like, it could have been a deal breaker in terms of me actually getting that book written and finished, the more I lent into that, the better it got actually. So once I'd got all the rules and stuff mapped out, it got a little easier, because then I realized, okay, now I can just focus in on my characters. And from there, that became easy. What about you? What was the kind of, in terms of sort of early struggles writing time travel, kind of how did you cope with that?
I think I agree with you. Like, by nature, it can be a little bit messy, and there's nothing anyone can do about that, because there are rules that I think there are certain rules that you have to follow. You can't do too much kind of hand waving and everything like that, because it just end up being confusing, like from a physical level. But then again, there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand about the universe, and we've created these laws ourselves, but they're not necessarily 100% true either. So I think, yeah, kind of being true to the law to the point of where it's understandable by everyone. I agree, but yeah, it's a struggle coming up with your plot in your head and making sure that you've firstly created something that a reader will see and think, okay, that's nice. I haven't seen this before. I wouldn't say 100% original, because nothing ever is, because we have our own inspirations, but at least it's fresh. And it adheres to a certain amount of rules, not have too many paradoxes, as you say. Sometimes it's unavoidable. And then just making sure that all of that thinking translates onto the paper. That's the original thing. But, well, I mean, I'm guessing, like you, I mean, once you get on a roll and you're confident, you've got the plot down and everything, it becomes much easier. I've just seen Jennifer say hi in the chat box to us too, so hello, hi. And we've got two questions from Jennifer as well. First is how did you come up with the title, and will there be another book to follow? Yeah, originally it was called Slingshot was called Counterflow, because the whole motion. Because he likens sometimes when you get caught in one of these loops like being an eddy in a river, and it will eventually release when the space-time continuum corrects. So that was it's Counterflow. But then I thought it might be a little bit obscure. It doesn't really, I don't think it's said enough. I mean, it wasn't necessarily active. It sounded more technical. So I changed it to Slingshot because effectively this character was thrown forward and then back to do. He's thrown into an apocalypse and then thrown back 5 fast days. So that being Slingshot like you would in a Craft Around the Moon made more sense, and that's why I come up with it. Would there be a sequel? I could do one possibly. It would be another standalone, a separate story, but at the moment I'm leaving it where it is. Over to you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Slingshot's a great title, because that really does conjure everything you've just said. The idea of going forward and then being pulled back and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. I mean, I think a title is important. I mean, I always have a working title. In fact, I often, Blackstone have done an absolutely amazing job on the covers. I do a fairly rubbish job on the covers to start with, but because I like to have something to work to. So coming up with a title is actually a big part of the process for me, and it makes it, I have this weird phase I go through when I'm writing, which is this absolute confidence at the beginning of a project, and then crushing fear that it's not going to be any good halfway through, and then you kind of just about get it back by the end. But that beginning phase is very important. So I like to attach a title, and for me, so my book's The Observer Effect, and The Observer Effect is actually a feature of the book. It features quite heavily, which is this idea that time is baked in. So time and events and things that happen are baked in by the sheer volume and number of people that witness it. So this idea of the observer effect is a true physics phenomenon. And if enough people look at something, it alters. Well, just looking at one single thing can alter the thing that's being observed. So I liked that idea that was actually quite restrictive in a way, that most things in time can't be changed. So the title came fairly early on and really sort of shaped the whole idea for the book. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, you want a title to be punchy and obviously try and sell, but you also want it to mean something to you as well. So it's always a kind of balance between that. And in terms of I hopefully that answers the question, Jennifer. Thanks very much for asking that. And also, yes, there will be another one. It's the 4th book in the series is out in October, and that's called The Quantum Chain. So that's the next one in the series.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good answer. I wish I could have said. I wish I'd have said that one. But Sabrina asks Darren, why did you choose the city of Hamilton? And hi, Sabrina, by the way. I chose Hamilton because it deserved destroying. It really does. No, it doesn't. It's Hamilton is Nick, FYI. It's between Niagara Falls and Lake Ontario, on Toronto, on the banks of Lake Ontario, and it's an old industrial city. Steel. That's where my wife's from. I just knew it, and it's easier. I've written locations where I don't know quite a lot, but this one I thought I'd just write somewhere that I knew, so I wouldn't have to do any research. It's as simple as that. What about yourself? I mean, did you when it comes to location specifics, do you choose what you know, or do you go big and end up looking at Google Maps for hours?
Well, I mean, that's touching on research. I mean, again, I didn't really kind of being an author kind of crept up on me really, and I in terms of being academic and the idea of enjoying research would have been completely alien to me about 5 or 6 years ago. So when I started out writing, I wanted to do something different because so many kind of the sci-fi and time travel books, they're always kind of really big, and I wanted to go super small. I wanted to write a character-driven drama, so I set mine in a spa town in Gloucestershire in England. and my main character is an antiques dealer. So I just went as small as I could possibly go. I knew where I was going in the end. I knew that I had a 7-book arc, and I knew that I wanted to do. I knew how big it was going to go in the end, but I thought, well, in which case I want plenty of room to grow. So I started very small. I set it in my hometown because, like you, I just kind of thought, okay, I don't think anyone's ever set a time travel book in Cheltenham.
Oh.
So I thought, okay, fine, I'm going to do it. So that's what I did. I went super small with it. I knew all the things, and I tried to. I mean, I loved the town, and I thought, if I love it enough in the book, hopefully readers will fall in love with it too. And why not? Why not just fall in love with a small town in England? It's fine. And then the research side of things came sort of later, in terms of, I suddenly realized, oh God, I'm writing time travel. I'm going to have to research all the different periods that I'm going back to, and just surprise myself with how much I kind of enjoyed that. Really, I mean, how do you find, researching different locations and time periods and stuff like that?
I like it. I mean, I'm a weirdo. I do it in general anyway. I mean,
that helps.
I know it does help a lot. I every day, I mean, you know what it's like. I can be researching something, and then you see something else. Oh, I didn't realize that it leads to this and leads to that, and you end up. I enjoy learning new things. It frustrates me that I'll only ever know such a tiny 0.0001% of what's available in the world, but it is what it is.
That's why we need to upload our brains.
Yeah, exactly. Always. It is, but I do enjoy that element of it. But also, yeah, you're right. Cheltenham, I don't think has been in a time travel book. But why not? As you say, an editor once told me very early in my writing career that the location, the town, and the city should be a character too, in the way that you put it across. And I can imagine there's a lot of character to be put in there for Cheltenham.
Yeah, big. And I think also with characters as well, I wanted my time traveler to be into antiques. I knew why for the series, but it wasn't that clear at the beginning of the series why that would become so important. But I liked the idea of him being surrounded by old objects. One of my characters owns a vinyl shop, so he's like this really kind of muso, best friend kind of character. So yeah, each place had very much a different vibe.
Yeah.
And the hypnotherapist that he goes to see, that's a very sort of posh office. And so yeah, absolutely. The more I leaned into that, and that felt like it was quite small, the more I enjoyed it. I enjoyed telling a small little, what felt like almost a soap opera, and then over the top of that is this huge sci-fi story. And I kind of liked that balance between these really small things and this huge kind of events. I had fun with that. Really enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, I can see that, and especially with the different scenes and all the different vibes there. Because I mean, if it's everyday settings, like one of them's a supermarket or like a gas station, petrol station, whatever, it's kind of what we do every day. Whereas you don't go into a vinyl record shop every day, but instantly in your head you can conjure up maybe like the slight odor of the old paper or cardboard.
Absolutely, yeah.
Records, maybe some the crackle of a record in the background. You can see it. It's like evocative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just checking out another question here. So this is for both of us. Yeah. This is interesting actually. So it's said when we look into the future of fiction, that it's quite common to find the people in the future are kind of depicted in a certain way, like maybe decadent or kind of lacking in our kind of
verve.
Yeah, it's kind of like how did you kind of approach that? Like, obviously you've gone into the future. How did you kind of depict mankind in the future?
The people I met were from 5 centuries into the future, so they were very different.
Okay.
Because when we go 5 centuries back, it's funny because they're a lot more factor and driven and less emotional. However, they do touch on they've got family and friends. It's an odd thing because I love history too. Sometimes when you see the history, for instance, Simon Sharma did a history of the UK. He's always very dry, when it comes to the people. Like they didn't have a sense of humor or they weren't cuz or anything like that, which I don't think was true at all. I think they had fun and laughter and everything. Otherwise, where did all the folk songs come from? How did people have a good time? Where did all these paintings come from that seem quite joyous. And I suspect it will be the same in the future. Maybe it's our fault for depicting people not quite correctly in the past and the future, because because we're at present, we think that we're the best because we're the latest, but we're not always going to be, are we?
No.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you were saying there. I approached it in a kind of similar way. I think, well, it's from a similar mindset, is this idea that, people in black and white photographs in the Old West, they all just sort of, all Victorian pictures or whatever, they just stared at the camera and they look kind of dead already.
Yeah.
And, because they were told just to stand still, and like they didn't really understand, no one's smiling for the camera kind of thing. And then I think because we haven't got a load of footage or interviews or 4K full color, chat with just a normal person in the past, I completely agree. I don't think people have changed that much at all. I mean, yes, okay, rather than read the paper, we're all staring at pieces of glass all day. But you kind of think, oh, fundamental beliefs, the fact that we live, we love, we laugh, we cry, we die. We're the same people. And I think it will be the same in the future. So, I've got some characters that live hundreds of years in the future. Some of them actually really like old stuff. So they like crackling fires and old stone buildings because it's kind of cool to them. And I've also got some of them who are like, I've got scientists who wear shorts and flip-flops and it's like sandals or whatever. And you kind of think, why should they be massively different? I prefer to put normal people in the past and normal people in the future, obviously with an understanding that their lives are different. But I think fundamentally as human beings, they're probably very similar. That's how I approach my futuristic characters.
Yeah, I like that too. I like it a lot because, innate inside of us all, I think, are similar feelings and emotions that, that we and our behavior gets changed by technology, but not necessarily, but that's just like outward behavior, isn't it? So I agree. I think we've got another question here. Well, first of all, Nick says that he loves the J. Bridgeman books. He was so
Just to be clear, that's not me in the chat. That's not me in the chat saying that I love my own books. Just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
Excited to read The Observer Effect, coming out within a few days of his finishing The Shadows of London.
Oh, cool.
Audible, listened to the first two in about 4 days. Now he wants the next one today.
Oh, Nick, that's lovely to read. Thank you very much. I'm really glad you enjoyed them. And Ray Porter did an amazing job, didn't he, on those? I actually listened to, I hardly ever listen to my own stuff. I hardly ever read my own stuff, but because you just live with it for so long. But I actually had a bit of a listen to the latest audiobook, and it was a very odd experience. I slightly lost myself for about 10 seconds in the story, and I was like, okay, Ray Porter's a genius. So yeah, thanks very much. Well, the next one, you can't have it today, you can have it in October.
Do you consider yourselves as competitive or co-workers? Do you fight against each other or work together to advance the interest in time travel? And hello, Paul. Thank you for joining us for a start. But Nick, do you hate me? I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, you're the enemy.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've never. I think it's been a bit of a journey for me to even be able to say I'm an author without going bright red. So there's a personal journey that I think most writers go on. There's the classic sort of imposter syndrome thing where you kind of go, I'm never going to be good enough. Eventually, at some point, you hit your stride and you kind of think, you know what, I love it. I don't care. I'm just going to get on with it. That's my experience of it anyway. And every other author I've ever spoken to seems to feel something similar to that. Very rarely does somebody just put on a cravat and just say, I shall now write an amazing novel. Yeah. It's a hell of a journey that you go on to find your voice, to find what you want to write about, and this, that, and the other. For me, I guess in the very early days, if I'm completely honest, I might have looked at other authors or particularly other sci-fi time travel authors, and maybe they were selling really well. And I might have looked at them and sort of thought, damn, if only they would stop selling books, I could sell mine. Maybe, is there any room for me, kind of thing? And then I realized that actually readers are like whales and authors are like plankton. There's so much more. There's so many more readers than there are authors. So every time I've recommended another series to somebody, doesn't mean that they're not going to read mine. It's just a really nice thing to do, to share. So I absolutely love networking with other authors. I love helping their work along. I actually chat to a few. So I absolutely see it as a cooperative. It's like there's plenty of readers to go around and everyone loves a recommendation, don't they? So that's kind of how I see it. What's your experience been like?
Same thing as me. I mean, I'm a reader too. And some of the best books that I've read have been on recommendation. The Altered Carbon was recommended to me. I like that book a lot. So I feel exactly the same way. And you can't really be competitive about it, because then that's assuming that someone will only ever read one book in their life and it has to be yours.
Mm.
It
And I
doesn't.
do feel like that, but I know it's not realistic.
I do too. I don't feel like that. I mean, I wish everyone the best with their endeavors, because it's not an easy thing to do. And you're right. You do go through a roller coaster of emotions, and the imposter syndrome, and but is it any good? Is it not? And sometimes when you can see the book at the end and everything, you've written it and you're at a launch or something like that, you're like, oh wow, you know, you're capable of doing that as an author. Really, I don't feel like that. I hope I created something that people like, but you never know until they come back to you. And that's one of the best feelings in the world, just having a reader come back, like very much like Nick in the chat just came back to Nick here and said that's one of the most gratifying feelings you can get out of it.
Definitely. So yeah, thanks for your question, Paul. That was a good one. So here's another one. How do you name the characters? I think that looks like it might be from Kimberly, because it looks like maybe her name didn't come up. But how do you? So thanks for the question, Kimberly. How do you name characters? Is it like he, she acts and sounds like a certain thing, so you'll name them after that?
Yeah, I think so. It's a bit of a mix for me. If there's someone I really hate and it's bad character, I will do that. I don't. It's too risky.
Yeah. Sabrina. Okay, sorry. Thanks, Sabrina. Thanks for the question. Sorry, go on.
I sometimes just names fit certain characters because you know what they're like in your head. I've got the Takeover with Blackstone as well, which is an audiobook. And the two main characters there were named after my two cats.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. Actually, his total name was, one of the cats was Tucker and one of them was Morris, who are sadly no longer with us, but they
live on in your books.
They do. Their names will echo through the centuries.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I called the character Tucker Morris. He just called it after the cats. Besides all that, I just try and give a name that's, sometimes just names just fit. It's really hard to explain. Do you get what I'm saying when I say that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've had what I'll often do is I'll bring up kind of, you know, I try and just bring up a list of names and surnames and things, and sometimes something literally just fits. I think you have to live with the character a little while. I'll often, a bit like when you're kind of coming up with a book title, I sometimes give them a holding name for a bit and kind of say, he feels like, you know, he feels like this kind of character, and I know somebody who's a bit like that, and you get a certain attachment to certain names, and they certain fit. And certain names are softer and certain names are harder. You know, I don't think Darth Vader is going to be a good guy. You know, there's certain names that you kind of think, Voldemort or whatever, they have these kind of darkness attached to them. So I think, yeah, and naming characters is important. I tend to just try and evoke something when I'm thinking of it. So, you know, I've got a character called Vinny, and his full name is Vincent Fry, and he's a guy who absolutely loves, you know, a lot of food. So for me, Vincent Fry seemed like the obvious name. It just reminds you a little bit about Vinny. And then I've got a character called Alexia, and to be honest, I just thought that she's a sort of sexy character, and I thought, okay, I just want to just evoke something in that name. And then with my main character Joe, I wanted him to be an average Joe. So every time I kept thinking of my average Joe character, I just thought, he's Joe. And then it just started to kind of stick that way. So yeah, I think naming is really important, actually. I think it can be a little bit underestimated. It's got to be memorable. I'm very careful to make sure that none of my characters have similar sounding names as well, because that can sometimes that can get a bit confusing with a big ensemble cast, and you're kind of going, who's that again? So I'm trying to make sure I'm covering the alphabet, I guess.
I get what you're saying. I'd say if you write dialogue between three characters who are called Harry, Herbie, and Harriet, or whatever.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah. Do you see technology or biology as being more dominant when it comes to time travel? I think it's technology all day long. I think that's what will make it possible, if it's at all possible in the future. And I know that that's one of the supposed paradoxes that no one's come back, but I think it'll maybe superstring theory or wormhole technology. I think that's what will probably bring it about. So I would say technology makes it more dominant. And the effects of that will be biological. but not the cause of it. Time travel. So
Interesting.
what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, the annoying answer, sorry, is kind of both. I actually sort of play around with both. For me, there was a bit of a eureka moment when I was in the planning stage of the first book. Was this idea that, and again, I referenced that Christopher Reeve film, quite an old film now, but Somewhere in Time, and this idea of being able to time travel without any technology, without any machines, without any physicists, without any planning. I liked the idea of actually starting with biology, because you said earlier, we don't understand how any of this works.
No, we don't.
So I loved this idea that, and then I started to come to sort of work with objects, and the fact that objects kind of build up, they kind of hold history, and if a person could unlock that somehow, that's a very biological, a very natural, almost a natural thing. So I had this idea that that time has like an immune system, and it's trying to heal, and that's why we're getting time travelers and that kind of thing. So I sort of started with that, but then I knew that I wanted to go into the future. So I've got technology is a layer that sits on top of that natural process, and that's how they sharpen and find and link together missions and travelers and events. So I've used sort of the science to kind of enhance the biology, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we're both thinking it in an opposite way, but it still achieves the same end. Yeah, no, I like that too. The Stephen King, was it 11/20 something 63?
I always call it Stephen King's JFK novel because I can never remember the numbers.
Yeah,
it's only because it's Stephen King he could get away with calling it a really difficult to remember date. I guess for people who were there it wouldn't be difficult, but for me, I can never remember it. I can't even remember people's birthdays, let alone the date on a book. But yeah,
I mean, thank God for Facebook for me, because it lets you know every morning.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right. The King one, that's another good fiction series. I do like that, and I think that's probably more along the lines of the biological, because it's a doorway or a gate that somehow opened back to that time. So
yeah,
and it didn't. I enjoyed the concept.
The way that he layered up the rules as well was a pretty much as you'd expect from him, really. But it was a master's class, really, in terms of how you don't need to info dump anything. You have the character discovering the rules by actually playing around with them. And there's a bit, I haven't actually seen the TV series, but I've read the novel, and there's a bit where he kind of travels back and he carves his name into a tree, and then he comes back there again, and obviously it's expanded and it's huge, and that's clearly a historical event that he's had an impact on, without any plot spoilers, because it's a fantastic book and you should definitely read it. But you do one thing and it undoes the other thing, and the way that he kind of unpacked the rules was just masterful, I thought.
Yeah,
and that's a big thing in writing time travel, isn't it? You've got to getting those rules across of your world without boring somebody with a sort of 10-page PowerPoint at the start of your book, is tricky, isn't it?
It is very tricky, but I try and do similar to King, in the way that you just got to weave it into the narrative, into the story, through discovery or maybe some dialogue. If you meet somebody who does understand it, but not not the, as Bob, dialogue. Where you meet a scientist and he just like dumps it all on top of you, and you stand there going, "Oh yes, of course."
Yeah, because that's how we speak, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, I mean, it's got to come across as natural. It's got to be in the narrative, and you don't want too long pages at the start. So I'm the same. If you can do things like that and go through and explore and find it, I think that's the best way around it. Well, here's a question for us both. What period of time would you travel to, and would you have an objective in mind to change history?
This is a question that I wrestled with when I was coming up with the rules. Again, because I think I was trying to imagine, what kind of time travel story did I want to write, and I figured out I didn't want to write one where huge events, were being wiped from time. I just didn't want to do that. I think there's some amazing books that do that, but I just didn't want to do that one. So I was quite restrictive with the rules, because I kind of like the idea that, not in a religious way, but in a kind of spiritual way, that there is some kind of plan for all of this. and that we're kind of just moving through it, and maybe there could be this, like this sort of immune system. So I kind of handed over the restrictions and the what could be changed and what couldn't be changed to time, you know. So because I didn't want to make those decisions, I wouldn't want to, you know, the obvious things are I want to go back and stop Hitler, I'd want to stop 9/11, I'd want to do I'd want to stop John Lennon being shot. You know, I mean, where do you stop? I think it would drive you absolutely insane. So, and who knows what you could make it 10 times worse, which is obviously stuff that authors like us explore in time travel. So for me personally, the honest answer, and maybe it's a bit boring, but the honest answer is I just won't want to change anything. I won't want to mess with anything, because you don't know what you might make worse. And that's my view on it.
No, I pretty much think the same. Is I wouldn't go back and change anything, because it risks my very existence.
Yeah.
Any small change that seems obscure to me could lead to that. As you say, I could go back and save John Lennon, but then what if somewhere down the line my mother went to a concert instead of meeting my father?
Yeah.
You know?
And we're into Back to the Future with the Beatles in it, which is a good concept.
Yeah. So if I had to travel in any way, direction, it would be forward, because I would love to know what the future holds. I'd love to see where my family is. I mean, it frustrates me that, you know, you're never going to be around forever for your family, and I'd love to see where they go in the future and if they're successful. So it would just be personal things.
Yeah, keep it small.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a question there. I'm interested to hear your answer on this, actually, because I know you've collaborated on novels, haven't you, with other authors?
Yes.
Yeah. So, as Jennifer was asking, thanks for the question, Jennifer. Would you? She'd like to know if we would both collaborate on a novel, for example. I've never done it, so I'm keen to hear what your experience of that is like, and you know, I guess pros and cons, or is it all pros? It's all pros. That's a joke. That's an author joke.
It's all pros.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I collaborating novel is good. It takes providing you have to have zero ego when you do it, because we all like our own ideas. But you have to be prepared to collaborate, maybe kill some of yours, accept some of the others, come up with the concepts together and share the writing. And that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
By any stretch of the imagination, because there's always going to be things that you're not necessarily doing your way. You do have to compromise, but then I think I was open-minded enough to realize that when I did compromise, it was probably for the better to make the book stronger, you know, and that goes back to swallowing your own ego. The cons are I mean, it feels good and I enjoy doing it, but it's special as well. I like that, but there's also something good about just having your own individual book.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. I think I can understand what you're saying about the kind of ego side of things. I mean, you know, having your name on the cover means that eventually, you know, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. That's how my editor described it to me when I was working with him. He said, "Look, this is what I think. It's your name on the cover kind of thing." And that kind of hit me quite hard, because you kind of think, yeah, at the end of the day, if this book isn't good and the feedback isn't good, that's basically on me. And I actually quite like that responsibility of kind of saying quality control is all mine, and therefore, because I work really hard on that, and I'm not quick either, so it takes me, you know, from the planning stage to the finished article, it can take me a year to write a book, and that's for some people that's really, really slow. For me, that's just normal, but for some people that's really slow. So I love the idea of collaborating, because I do love feedback. I've used beta readers. I've obviously worked with an editor. I write scenes with my partner. We read chapters at the end of the day to each other. You know, I love being collaborative. I love feedback, but I think maybe my speed might be an issue. I'd be a bit worried about, you know, letting somebody else down, I guess. You know, in some ways, when it's all on me, the pressure is all on me. I'd be quite interested in it. I'm very interested in it, which is why I'm waffling. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in the process, I guess, of how the hell that you get to that end result, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to describe it is if you have multiple point of views, that makes it easier. Because
Yeah.
if you stick to one point of view and another one does another point of view, they're always going to have different voices, but they're in the same story.
Yeah.
Writing the same character
I can
takes
imagine that's tricky. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
trickier, especially if you've got a solid idea in your head of that character, like, as you know when you wrote your books, and then you have to like start second guessing like some of the dialogue, what the other person might be doing and everything. That makes it tricky. So keeping it to that is good, and obviously collaborating with editors and everything. I enjoyed that process. I like it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm sure you do too. Like, I mean, some people, because I've done some indie books before, and in those communities, some people can like clutch the pearls at the thought of working with an author, an editor. They're like, it'll ruin my voice. I mean, I'm sure you can assure them right now, and I can. It doesn't ruin your voice. It helps you like iron out kinks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like it was a baptism of fire, really. And I think it was like I felt like I've never done any creative writing courses, so for me it was a bit like that, really. It was an amazing experience, actually. I think if you treat it as a learning experience, I never feel like the finished deal ever. So I love learning new stuff. So yeah, for me it was a fantastic experience working with an editor. It's a really important relationship. If it's like anything, I think if it didn't work, you've got to change fast, because there's so much trust. You know, for me, when you're working with an editor, it's kind of it's such a private, personal thing, writing a novel for so long, and then it suddenly goes out into the world. So that first reader, if you like, if that's an editor, you know, there's a lot of trust there. You know, because the kind of stuff I write, you know, my heart and soul is poured into that. You know, I'm not just,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of me in those books. So you kind of feel it can be a little personal. You kind of say, you know, what do you think? You know, you're waiting for that feedback. So you've got to trust that person. If they come back and say, there's some work to do, you've got to kind of go, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You just have to swallow it. Another question here. Do you design the covers yourself, or do you just give a direction what it should be like to someone else? There's an option C here as well. I would just add on to the end of that. Or does your publisher just give it to you and say, suck it up? So what was it, A, B, or C?
Yeah, for me, it's a really nice version of, what were they again? B.
Okay.
So the answer is B. So yeah, the middle one, the kind of, you know, working with Blackstone on the covers was a really enjoyable experience. I mean, my background is graphic design, so I'm sure sometimes they were like, yeah, okay, Nick, just go away and leave us alone. I like to be involved in everything, but I also know that there's a time to say, look, that's what I think, that's what the book's about. This is the kind of thing. I mean, I basically, they asked me to send a whole load of examples of the kind of covers that would evoke the vibe of the book. I left them to it. They came back, blew my mind. Everything's been good ever since, because, you know, they're brilliant at doing that. So yeah, I love that first time you open the email and they say cover attached. I love that moment, because it's suddenly the book becomes something bigger than you.
Yeah, totally. When we did Don't Move with Blackstone, we actually had a luminous spider's web on the front of the cover.
I remember that cover. That's an amazing cover.
It is. I mean, you have to charge it under the light, you know, like the old school luminous thing.
Yeah, that was an amazing cover.
Yeah, and I remember getting it and opening it. The options, Blackstone's very collaborative, as you mentioned. They're excellent at things like that. They give us a few options, and I saw that one straight away and just went, that's the one.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah, and I couldn't wait to see it, and I got it, and it was excellent. Besides all that, for some of my individual stuff I do, I use, recently I've been using a book cover creator from the Ukraine, and she's excellent. I just give her images and directions and what I would like to do and the type of typography, and she would do that for me at very reasonable prices.
Right.
And obviously I give a tip. But so it's a mixture of things. With a publisher same as you, B, with some of my indie stuff, or some stuff I've given to a publisher in the past. And I think you mentioned before, you get your own cover created when you're writing it to help you, inspire you and everything. I do things like that too. So a mixture with B and C. But we do have another question here from Sharon. Hello, Sharon. Glad you could join us. Do you have a favorite character you have written, and why?
I mean, I think when you're writing first person, if you don't love your main character, I think that really depends, actually. I think if you're writing third person, you can have characters that are just important to the plot and maybe you don't love them, but you have to love them a bit in their own way. Otherwise, you're not going to do them justice. So I think there are some characters, though, that when I've written them. So I think first person, the character of Joe, my main character, if I didn't love him, I'd be in trouble. So I kind of love him. but he comes to life when I shine a mirror using other characters on him. So I've got a character, his best friend Vinny, who I've mentioned already, who owns the vinyl shop. He's just good, a good, decent, loyal, reliable friend. So I always love writing him because it's like the hug that you need when things are going really tough. And then I've also introduced a new character in the Observer Effect, actually, in the third novel, who's a really spiky New Yorker. And she was great fun to write. And as soon as I found her voice, and she just constantly tortures Joe verbally, that to me was like a brother-sister relationship, and that just crackled off the page. It was almost like it was writing itself at that point. So sometimes if you find a character, you love them because you know them so well, and they make your job easier because they just write their own dialogue. You kind of go, what would Gabrielle say here? What's the most hurtful thing you could say here? And she just says it. And I'm going to be like, okay, good. That's easy then.
Yeah, that's totally true.
What about you?
Absolutely true. Yeah, you nailed it, actually. If you get into it and you like them, it makes it so easy to read. And for some reason, and this is no reflection on my character, I like the bad guys. I do, and I find it easy because it's easier. Like, because I wouldn't say but I'm quite self-praise is no praise, but I consider myself quite a kind-hearted, like nice-natured person who enjoys a laugh. So being able to write those nasty people who you would consider like an a-hole is to some extent it's enjoyable, and you can cut loose, and I can almost let out like a sneaky hidden Darren and like insert him in there. And
Dark Darren. It's kind of like, it's a form of escapism, I think, isn't it? While you're writing, you can kind of say, I would never act or do this, and that's a really good point. I've not thought of it like that, but yeah, I think it is fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and when you can do that and you're actually enjoying it, and exactly like you did with the New York character, you could see it so vividly. That it shoots. Then I think that's that's how you do it. But so
I got a question here about process, actually, writing process. So how long does it take? I've revealed already how long it takes me, embarrassingly long. How long do you take for just like a standard length novel from kind of, they've said here from concept. So like when you kind of have that little spark moment, how long for you?
Well, yeah, the seed of an idea to a book, it varies for me, but I would say that I get the seed of idea, and I have think about some plot points maybe for a week or two, but then I've just got to think about it for another couple of weeks, just to see if there's anything more I can do, any deeper, any different directions I want to take it. And thank you for the question, Nicole. I would say it depends. Like if I'm writing, because I like writing some genre fiction, space opera for fun. Okay. And I've got it's a palate cleanser, and I can write those books in a month.
Wow.
But for something like Slingshot, I would say 3 or 4 months.
Right. Okay.
Because it's time travel. It's not like an A to B journey, where you can just make up anything on a whim, because it's space opera in the far future. So you can create any devices you want for any problems, or the baddest creatures you can think about and throw them in there. You can't do that with time travel. Well, you can, but
it won't be very good.
No, it wouldn't.
No. Yeah. Well, for me, it's I think I tend to be in the planning phase for about 3 months. Mm-hmm. So that's from kind of concept through to, I tend to plan out the whole book, and then I'll write it in about 3 months. So I guess that's kind of, you're kind of 6 to 7 months in, and then the editing process, by the time you get to the finish, it's about a year.
Yeah, I should have added in the editing process, because for those of you who don't know, we have a content edit where we deal with an editor who's purely focused on story and maybe some narrative and consistency in the story. And then after that, we have our copy or line edits, which is purely for spelling and grammar, sweeping up all of our obvious mistakes.
Yes.
Sharon, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Sharon, thanks for answering the questions. It's fun. So thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad. Question from Ella for both. What was your hardest scene to write? And have you read anything that made you think differently about time travel? So it's 2 questions. Let's do the hardest scene to write first.
Yeah, God, you go first.
My hardest scenes to write. I love action. I love the action scenes best. They're never difficult to write. I think the hardest scenes for me to write, and I can think of some individual ones, but I would say it's where you have to get some information across, and it's not always obvious of how to do that. That's hard to write. And just to expand on that a little bit more, I have a scene here in Slingshot where Joey Hawk, the main character, he meets like a mystery woman who's been helping like his future self. And I have to get across really what she's doing there in a bar. And there's an easy way to do that by just having a very clunky conversation, but it doesn't work. So then you've got to think about ways of, does he observe her? Does he overhear it? I think it's the information scenes that I find the hardest. And I know that might sound vague, but I think, Nick, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think I'd agree with that. I mean, I can think of a few specific scenes where I wrote them and then I rewrote them and then I walked away from them for a week. I came back, I tried again and again. And for me, those are the future scenes I find particularly difficult because I just want to come up with something unique and original. And that is really, really hard to do, if not impossible, as you said earlier. Yeah. So, I want to try and put my own spin on it. So I do find writing about the future difficult, although I'm just about starting to enjoy that with some of the, it all comes from ideas at the end of the day. But yeah, I think those scenes specifically, it's the same answer, I think. If there's a lot of information to get across, there's a cardinal sin, which is, info dumping, and trying to get that information across in a way that, fooling the reader sounds like it's some kind of trick, but it is in a way, it's a sleight of hand in a way to kind of say, look, I want you to get to the end of this chapter and think, oh yeah, great, we've got a great hook into the next chapter, and not really realize that we've just covered a ton of information that I know is important. And that is crafting. And sometimes they can take, I'm moving sections around and I'm hacking into it. It's like sculpture in a way. You're kind of trying to sculpt a scene to work, and then yet other scenes that, I don't know, it's a present day scene and someone's having a party, and you kind of go, well, that was easy in comparison. So some scenes are sort of in some ways torturous, but then when you look back on them and you read back over them later, if it all flows, none of the pain is visible, hopefully. Just because they were hard, it's kind of like no one should know. It's kind of, that's the idea, is to smooth over the cracks and say, yeah, that was like torture, but hey, it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm sure my brother thinks that when I write books, I'm overlooking a lake in France,
okay,
with a typewriter, off the back of my chateau.
Yeah.
They don't see me in my small office with the freezing conditions outside where I live, and then
grinding away at the keyboard.
Yeah, and then being called down for a sandwich that my wife's lovingly made.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a funny thing. I think you nailed it when you said when you look at the end products, you think, okay, that's okay, but little does anyone realize, what really went into making that what it was.
Yeah. I'd love sometimes I sort of think, I wonder if I should let people read the first draft and, but no, there's no point. The end result's all that matters, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, totally. And has anything you read made you think differently about time travel?
Yeah, I think particularly The Time Traveler's Wife, I think that really, it was quite dark in places. It had romance in there as well, and I think it treated time travel, it was a real crossover novel. The fact that you could write a time travel novel that just about everybody was reading really gave me some confidence that I could write maybe, I don't know, popular time travel. So I think that really sort of shifted my perspective, and I think more recently something like Dark Matter, something like that really kind of clicked a few little switches. All Are Wrong Today's, that clicked another couple of little switches across in my mind. So yeah, I guess you're always looking at things for different angles. And you?
Yeah, well, mine would be, and I agree with what you say, so I don't want to repeat what you're saying. So I would go all the way back to the start when I read The Time Machine. It was the first time travel book. And that first sort of brought the possibilities alive in my mind. and you know, as a young boy, your mind starts racing.
Nice, thanks for the question, Ola.
Yeah, we do have another one. Who would be the dream cast in the film adaptation of your novel? Me.
There you go. You're done.
Yeah. So you, I mean, who do you think would be? We'll just do like a lead and two supports, okay?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really depends. You know, I've got nothing against at all. You know, sometimes when you take something like, I don't know, High Fidelity, and it ends up being kind of, you know, based in the you know, it's a British book and it ends up based in the US, and yet it's an amazing film. So, you know, really good example of kind of like sometimes you can completely move something, it's fine. So I think it would really depend on US or UK, you know. So I know who's going to direct it. That would be Edgar Wright. So I'd want Edgar Wright to direct it. I've got kind of Vinny. I think that would be Nick Frost. So I've got him sorted out. I know that I need Benedict Cumberbatch in it as somebody. And I've got Toby Jones as W.P. Brown. But in terms of Joseph, it's so difficult because it kind of changes week to week. So I'm always looking though. I mean, I'm just constantly, I'm always like, he'd be a good Joseph Bridgman. I think actually Jonathan Groff, recently I've thought Jonathan Groff would make a good Joseph Bridgman in the US version. So I have completely separate lists for like the US and the UK version.
No, I can see that. I can see that. Or you could do somebody who could do both. I'm watching Snowpiercer at the minute with Sean. Yeah, he's whenever he tries to put on like a classy accent, it doesn't work for me. You know.
No, that's not his role, is it? But what about you? Who would star in your movie?
Yeah, sorry, I was going off on a massive tangent then. Sorry, Sean Bean, if you ever watch this, I love Sharp. Right, the star in my movie. I think a good lead character would be Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
No, I'm not. I think Ruby in this book, Megan Boone from The Blacklist. I think she would be.
Yeah. Nice.
It's this one that's caught me.
Well, it's not our job, is it? That's you know, not that we'd have any say in it anyway.
No, we wouldn't get to say. I can dream all I want.
Yeah. Right, we got I think this is probably the final question. I think we're probably going to wrap up fairly soon. So, what guidance would you offer to a fiction writer new to time travel, and what is the takeaway message you'd leave for readers about your novel? So, I think two-part question. So, in terms of what guidance would you offer a fiction writer who's new to time travel?
I would say new to time travel would be exactly what we talked about before. Learn some of the rules, learn some of the tropes. I would say read in time travel as well to make sure you understand what's been done before. And the simple reason for that is going back to what we said before. If you want to put a fresh spin on it, you need to know really what's out there. And don't be afraid to take risks. Once again, what we both said earlier before, we're always, both of us, even though we have books out with Blackstone, we're always trying to improve our craft. And the day that I try and stop improving is probably the day that I give up writing. And I'm never going to do that. So I would say always try and improve your craft at the same time as doing the writing to make sure the story really leaps from the page. That would be my personal guidance, but everyone, each to their own. What's yours?
Yeah, that's all good stuff. I think if it's your first novel, I might say, are you sure you want to do time travel as your first one? But presuming that you've done something else, so I'd probably say don't. But no, I'd be more supportive than that, obviously. I think, I'd focus very much, initially I'd focus very much on the rules, make sure you understand what your rules are. Then once you got those locked down, forget that it's time travel and focus purely on your characters and story. And then try and mesh those together, because if you can do that, and then it's to make the story your own. It's like, try and do something that you really enjoy and that you want to do. And for me, I've ended up being a real planner. So I think when you're working with time travel, it's quite a good idea to do a bit of planning, to know where you're going, to know, so that you can fill your scenes earlier in the book with interesting things that you might come back to later and stuff like that. So I think with time travel, it's a good idea to do a bit of planning. And I think the second part of that question is, well, why don't you go first, Darren? Just what's the sort of takeaway message about, we've talked a lot generally about writing and time travel. What about, your novel? What's the sort of takeaway that you want readers to have today?
I think it's in adversity, because we're living in strange times, and time travel is strange things. It's like in adversity, people often come together and end up doing the right thing, and that's my message in the novel. That there's always hope there, and ultimately, I've got faith in humanity, and hopefully, when people read the book and they see what situation the character's in, they can see how I think humanity would react under those extreme circumstances, or when we do come up against real adversity. We see the best in people.
Well, that sounds like the kind of positive, hopeful message we need at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I set out, and when I set out to write my novels, I wanted to write time travel that people could understand. So I wanted it to be, I was very happy with the idea that I could write popular time travel. Like, I'm really, that's what I set out to do, and that's what I've continued to do. I've stuck with that kind of vision. So I think my stories, they're a mixture really. There's some, they're character driven. There's some drama. There's some comedy. There's action. So there's a lot going on in them. But I think again, the themes really are they're about friendship, family, hope, all the good things. So yeah, there's the third book in the series is out now, so it's a good time to get in if you're one of those people that likes to get into a series and chew through the first 3 books and then get ready for the 4th one in October.
It's been such a great discussion, and I just really enjoyed seeing both of you really dive into your work. For those tuning in, we're wrapping up Blackstone Book Talks, Turning the Clock on Time Travel Fiction. It's a dual launch celebration for today's audio format release of Slingshot by Darren Wearmouth, as well as the March 15th launch of The Observer Effect, Book 3 in the Joseph Bridgeman series by Nick Jones. Darren and Nick, I just want to say thank you so much for leading today's virtual event. I thought it was just a fabulous opportunity to explore the nuances of your works, your inspirations, and the tropes behind the genre of time travel itself. Pretty sure we'll all be staying put for that film adaptation from both of you. And we just can't wait to see what you'll be releasing next. For those tuning in, you can learn all about the authors and where to purchase their releases by heading to our website at www.blackstonepublishing.com. Thank you guys so much. And for any other questions you have, please feel free to keep them coming in our live stream, and I will be passing them to the authors. But thanks again, guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. And congratulations on your launch again.
Thanks very much. And thanks for everyone tuning in. That was really good.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in, and thank you to Blackstone as well. Massive thanks to you guys. These are our excellent publishers who make our books possible. So thank you.
Our pleasure. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye.